with fever. 2 days prior to that, I am infected. So on 31st July, I have fever. So maybe on 28th or 29th, I was infective, and I'm going to be infective till maybe 7th of August. So this period, if you target and quarantine these patients, identify and quarantine and identify the close contacts, you are going to successfully win the match. But it's so difficult because you have to deal with the population, their economic problems, their psychological problems. It's easy said, but not easy to do it. As you all know, it spreads by close contact, aerosol and droplets. You should not be wiping your eyes, nose or mouth all throughout when you are walking around where you are indoors, because if there is a virus which has come in contact with your hands, if you clean them, it is going to go away. But by mistake, if you touch either of these organs, it can be transmitted even through eyes. Of course, nose is a potential transmitter, but eyes also can be transmitted, especially in poorly ventilated, crowded indoor settings and badminton courts and gyms. It would be definitely faster transmissibility. What about the contaminated surfaces, like, sofa sets or the doors? People used to wipe the doors. I remember last year, some people may be doing that. Yes, you can spray sanitizer and that's it. But I remember the courier man would give a courier, and I will not touch it for 24 hours. That's not the case now. It remains for some time. But although, having said that, they do not specifically saying that how long it remains, but they say it remains there for half an hour to 1 hour. It is better that you touch the parcel by washing hands and wash your hands thereafter. So this is the transmissibility, which is causing a lot of damage to globally. Now, in the next slide, what we are going to see is what symptoms patient will have. There is a portal named as Integrated Disease Surveillance Program Portal, IDSP. Most important when we are dealing with the suspected COVID cases, two things we have to ask: close contacts and travel. Now, let us assume that Maharashtra was, it is a fact. Maharashtra was having very high incidence of COVID. So those people who are coming from this state and going somewhere else, they should be telling the history that I had visited so-and-so place, maybe Mumbai. So maybe the doctor there can say, and he will have a vision and he can get you investigated. Most important symptoms, I would tell you, fever is the commonest symptom. In the first wave, there was a lot of stress was given to loss of appetite and loss of smell, almost 15%. In fact, it is said that if a person with fever and a close contact of a COVID person and he has loss of smell, you don't do RT-PCR. Almost 90%, I can say that he is a COVID-19 positive case. But that's the experience that you cannot just say that, you cannot just tell somebody. It's the experience. There was some term used in first wave, happy hypoxia. People used to be hypoxic, but they never used to realize they are hypoxic because they never had symptoms of breathlessness. So that was happy hypoxia. So if you catch the patient at that point of time, he says, no, I'm absolutely all right, only fever. So just do his SpO2. And if it is showing lows in a room air, you can diagnose COVID. Children hardly had symptoms. They just had symptoms like adults. More symptoms in older and immunosuppressed patients like diabetic or those who are taking immunosuppressed or who are suffering from malignancies. In the second wave, as against the first wave, most important symptom which I have noticed is fever and fatigue. Patient says, no, I have nothing, feverish feeling, but I have just taken the thermometer. There is no fever, but I'm extremely fatigued. Young individual who is working with the IT company, he says, no, otherwise I'm all right, but I don't feel like going. That's the point. Just do SpO2 and if necessary, do his RT-PCR. Now, the clinical criteria, in short, I'm trying to give you because it's not it's not possible to give everything in detail. So clinical is mild, moderate, severe. As soon as you get the patient, you have to categorize them. Why? We'll come to that later. First of all, you ask symptoms and the close contact. Then see his SpO2. If it is normal, more than 94, 95, 96, possibly he's going to fall into the category of mild. But his fever is high, he's little breathless, that is respiratory rate is more than 24. And on room air, his SpO2 is dwindling, sometimes 93, sometimes 92. You think, and of course he has got other symptoms. You think it's a not mild only, it's more, maybe going on towards moderate. And of course, when it is less than 90 SpO2 and respiratory rate very high, 30, and patient is breathless, you don't have to diagnose. It is self-explanatory. Of course, with the close contact, he doesn't have cardiac failure, doesn't have asthma. You have to rule them out. Immediately in the first wave, what we learned was when the wave struck us, that time we were not doing it. But somewhere in August last year, people started doing it chest CTs, if you remember now. Though there's a debate now whether we should be doing that or no, but that was very helpful because that time RT-PCR would take at least 36 to 48 hours for the result to come. So that means that patient is going to be infective to others in that precious period. Instead, if I do HRCT at that point of time, the result will be available within at least 2 to 3 hours. And if the score is 25%, that means 25% of the lung is damaged with the pneumonia, you can direct the patient accordingly. If it's a mild case, it could be quarantine. If it is moderate, you have to admit in ward. And if it is severe, the 50% of the lung is damaged, possibly in ICU or HDU. Now, having said that, you are doing all this, but at this, you have to take precautions for yourself also. You should be wearing proper outfit because if the patient coughs on you, you are going to get COVID-19 unless you are lucky enough. No, maybe your immune system is very good enough. So you have to cover yourself with maybe the face shield, if not possible, goggles. Mask is a must. That time initially also, even now, those who are running COVID OPDs, I'm not saying managing the wards, COVID OPDs, they do wear the gown, they wear the gloves, they wear mask, goggles when they are coming in contact. So these precautions we have to take because we do not want to be the patients ourselves. That's what, and of course, we should not be spreading the disease from one patient to another. After that, we have classified, we have categorized, not classified. We have to diagnose whether this suspected patient who is breathless or asymptomatic, but SpO2 is little on the higher side or respiratory rate is 30, 24 per minute, we have to subject him for investigation. Next slide, please. So we have to diagnose this the patient. Now these are a lot of slides, but I have just highlighted those points which are absolutely mandatory. Now in this season, if I get a patient with fever, cough and breathlessness, along with RT-PCR, I must do a dengue test because it's possible that dengue also will be there in this season. So basic blood worker, you do CVC. You don't do all those which I've mentioned routinely. What I've underlined is RT-PCR was the investigation of choice, though it is not as sensitive, 78% sensitive, but that's quite significant for a person. What we used to do that time was in the first wave, if the RT-PCR came negative after 36 hours report, of course, we used to repeat after 7 days and we used to quarantine the patient or isolate or home isolation or admit the patient. If you happen to get X-ray chest, bilateral patchy opacities are diagnostic of COVID pneumonia. HRCT will give you almost RT-PCR diagnosis. Classical ground glass opacities, GGO, they are known as. There is a characteristic reverse halo sign, and later on there would be cavitation. That we will not go. But these 3 or 4 things you must remember. Later on, somewhere in October, antigen and antibody test came into limelight, but they are not diagnostic. You can do rapid antigen test, but it is just 35% sensitive and specific. That means if you do the test and the patient is negative but has symptoms, I'm going to say that it is better that you do RT-PCR and turn out to be negative. So I would say that if I have to diagnose it, and if the facilities are available, I would rather do RT-PCR for diagnosis than anything else. Next, please. These are the tests which are done for mild, moderate, and severe only when patient is going from moderate to severe. All these D-dimer, ferritin, CRP, these three tests are absolutely must, because when you have a diagnosis to be moderate, if these tests are going up, either he's moving to severe or he's moving for the cytokine storm. Out of which the one more very specific test for COVID-19 is IL-16, interleukin 6. And we have a drug available against this interleukin. So this also when going up from moderate to severe, this is not done for mild and asymptomatic at all. Okay. So these are the tests of absolute prime importance only in admitted patients, and the intensivist would decide that. Next, please. As I said, RT-PCR is the most important. Now, someone can ask me, why not culture the virus? Yes, we can culture. But you know what? If you send it to the laboratories, culture will take a lot of time. So you are not going to wait for the viral culture to be positive. And there is a biosafety hazard where the population of the laboratory workers would get or can get COVID. So it is not done. You may also do blood cultures, because very often COVID-19 moderate to severe cases have got not only COVID pneumonia, they have a super added infection. So later on it becomes difficult. So that's why you may collect blood culture, but that's not absolutely must. So when we have diagnosed that patient has got, let us say, presume that is a moderate case. He's got a moderate COVID-19 illness, infection, and we have to give treatment. Now, there was a confusion regarding this for so many months, I can say. Next slide, please. The confusion was, next, please. I just put this slide for PPE, how to dove and how to take it away. See, when you're wearing a PPE kit and when you start removing it, when you remove the gloves, immediately you wash your hands with a lot of soap and water, and then take away the gown and the mask. Even don't touch the mask before that, because otherwise, whatever infection is there, maybe you with your gloves, that you are going to transmit, and you are going to infect yourself and you are going to infect others. So that's why doffing and donning technique. So if it's a mild case, actually it's a reassurance, which we could not give last time because it was new to us. Just reassuring that you are just having mild illness. It's like a flu-like illness. Just drink a lot of water, because fever. You can give paracetamol according to his fever. But if the fever is not responding, ask him to give you a ring. Telemedicine has come up like anything in the last 1.5 years. Because it is better not to expose to the patient and not expose the patient to you and you to patient. So he would give a ring to you, and maybe you can add mefenamic acid. But if it is showing other symptoms like breathlessness, he has to immediately go to COVID center. Remember, all these cases have to go to dedicated COVID centers. We have primary health centers, we have government hospitals, we have best of private setups, and best of private COVID centers. It's better that COVID center or the medical college center, because there are all everybody is aware of the latest guidelines. There is no role of azithromycin, ivermectin, doxycycline today. Although initially it was used very commonly, thinking that we can cure super added infections. It's a virus, so azithromycin is not going to go against virus, but it can prevent the super infection. Now, one should not never ever use this, because if you have diagnosed it, if you have not diagnosed and suspecting it, of course, you are not going to retain the patient with you. You have to go to the send it to COVID center. If it's coughing a bit, you can give antitussives. Now, there's a new emerging product or the drug, which is the best at this stage, and that's a monoclonal antibody. It's an antibody which is available for the antigen of the virus. Now, this antibody, what will it do? I'm seeing a patient who is just mildly infected, So as soon as the RT-PCR comes positive, if I give him antibody, so his viral, what is happening when he is getting infected, he's got infected today, let us assume, and tomorrow or day after he's having fever, and his RT-PCR doesn't, so day after tomorrow, that is 2nd or 3rd August, he will get the result. He is in a viral replication phase. That means virus is multiplying very fast. At that point of time, if I give these monoclonal antibodies, I am going to stop the attachment of the virus to the host cell. You got my point? Let us assume that 10 host cells were affected by the virus. I'm taking very small number, it's not 10. Okay. And now tomorrow it's going to be 100 because 10 is to 10. But if I give antibody today, this 10 will remain. They will be infected, but they will not become 100 infected host cells. So the symptoms experienced by the patient, they just melt. Of course, whom to give antibody, when to give antibody is absolutely essential and is a job of a specialist. It's not on the, you cannot give it just like that because it has to be given in a saline, normal saline drip. Anaphylaxis has not been reported, but it can occur. The little detail about the antibody I would give you in the next few slides. HCQ, I must make a mention. Hydroxychloroquines were given in our medical college to all the staff when the COVID erupted, to have a preventive effect, not only curative, so that I do not develop HCQ. But that kind of knowledge is not, it's not a knowledge now. That was a wrong thing, but we cannot blame. At that point of time, we had no other drugs. So it was marketed that yes, it does work. And it does have little antiviral properties, but that doesn't mean it cures COVID or it prevents COVID, okay? So HCQ, ivermectin, azithromycin, doxycycline has no role. I don't think one should use it. This is WHO guidelines. And only some people use it because they feel that it is their responsibility, okay? So that is the mild case. Now let us come to the high risk group. This is what I want to show you this slide most importantly. Those patients who have comorbid illnesses, either chronic lung, kidney, liver disease, obesity, or ischemic heart disease, though these are the patients, sometimes they go from mild to moderate. What happened in last 6 months or so, or 8 months or so, we saw many prescriptions with a lot of steroids given by the general practitioner as well as physician specialists at that point of time. Because we were clueless. Patients were also having no faith in the doctors because there was a news everywhere. This is not good. This is not correct. This is not recommended, or this is recommended. And since steroid give you a sense of well-being, so it was commonly used. But remember, when you are giving this drug, steroid, in the viral replication phase, it's not that you are going to curtail the immune response, you are going to accelerate the immune suppression. The viral activity is going to go high up. So the patient who was going to be only mild, you are going to convert him into moderate. The one who was moderate, you may convert in the replication phase, of course. That's why maybe in somewhere in April to June, we saw many mucormycosis, fungal infections. So that was the possibility. It has been thought. So say no to steroids in first 7 days. For that, you have to remember day 1. Take very proper history and find out which is a day 1, because everything depends on that. I'll tell you next slide. Next, please. Now let us come to the moderate cases. Here, patients, he's feeling little breathless. His RR or respiratory rate is around 24. SpO2 is dwindling. You have to admit this patient for observation in the ward. It is possible that patient will say that I will take it outside, or that's of course is take. But ideally, because these are the patients can from suddenly that used to get transferred from moderate to severe. I have seen number of patients. And not only that, I've seen the complications and terminal illnesses, myocarditis and die. So these patients should be admitted in the ward. They should be given proper oxygen support. Okay, till his oxygenation becomes around 94 in the room air. So you have to put him on oxygen, 4 to 6 liters. Now there are many things available. Either you give just nasal prongs, or you give mask or mask with reservoir, or sometimes we had to go even in moderate cases to non-invasive ventilation, sometimes mechanical ventilation. So be careful. This is a population you should not be. You should be more careful, because severe, that's severe, but here they can turn into severe. Remdesivir. Now you have learned so many news from the television and print media as well as electronic media. About 2 months ago, there was a shortage, and people, even today, when I'm treating COVID patients relatives insist that why you have not given remdesivir, because of the easy availability of the knowledge, which a general population is not supposed to know. Have you heard any cancer patient saying that give me particular vincristine drug? No, but because of the easy spread of this remdesivir molecule, the news, remdesivir molecule itself is very good if properly used. So most of the guidelines do not recommend it, but still it is used. And IDSA, that is Infectious Disease Society of America, they still say that you can use them. Convalescent plasma, when a person has COVID, and after 3 weeks to 4 weeks, if you collect the plasma, he will have antibodies. That was the concept. It was floating, or it was doing very well, but then they realized the side effects are very many. The allergic reaction, then carrying the illnesses, carrying the infection, malaria or these dengue can be transmitted. So convalescent plasma is not included in the guidelines now. So that's what I'm saying. We are evolving. Okay. So everything is not true and false. In that time it was true, but now it is not no more recommended. And you should use only recommended guidelines. That's what I would tell you at the end of the lecture, which are the recommended guidelines. The most important part is done by anti-inflammatory or immunomodulators, that is Dexa, our own injection dexamethasone 6 milligram once or twice a day is sufficient to take care of his inflammation. Now, when to use it, it is a specialist job. It is not you and me. Definitely not on the OPD basis. I would advocate against OPD basis. Never ever use Dexa on OPD basis, because patients keep on taking Dexa themselves. One can use methylprednisolone, Dexa, or prednisolone also. Okay. So this is the best drug. If you ask me what is the best drug, oxygen and dexamethasone. This is today. Anticoagulation. Why? Because we said this is not only just inflammatory disease, it is also prothrombotic disease, especially affecting the pulmonary vasculature and other vasculature also. People, we have noted coronary thrombosis, we have noted gangrene. There's a series of patients who had intestinal gangrene because of the thrombosis. Then we had strokes. So anticoagulation is a must in moderate to severe cases. In moderate, one can give low dose, that is 0.5 milligram per kilogram for 5 to 7 days. In severe, you have to give good dose. Now here you can you give monoclonal antibody? This is a specialist domain. We will not interfere with the specialist, and either infectious disease specialist or ICU specialist. They would decide if he's turning towards moderate. Of severe, we cannot give monoclonal antibodies out, because once the spike protein is entangled with the host cell, whatever antibody you give, it is not good. Secondly, antibody is very, very expensive. I will tell you the cost. So having said this about the moderate disease, almost always I tell everybody, stay alert on the 7th or 8th day of illness, provided you have identified first day. Why? Cytokine storm. And this cytokine storm is very, very difficult to treat, and it just goes unnoticed like that. Patient can just have simple myocarditis and death. Okay, so CRP, D-dimer, ferritin all go up, IL-6, and patient becomes more breathless, which he was not earlier, or if he's already breathless, he becomes more breathless. That's how he lands into severe disease. Severe means he has got more than 50% of the lung is damaged, at least more than 50. I have seen to the tune of 80% lung damage, patient has come out. Of course, his his luck. It's not the doctors, but we try to give the support. Severe, of course, you have to give oxygen. We have to add now broad spectrum antibiotic because his lungs are damaged. So the already pneumonatic. So he can have super infection. So we give broad spectrum antibiotic. Same modulators like dexamethasone, full anticoagulation in good dose, 1 milligram per kilogram in enoxaparin. And now this is a wonderful drug, tocilizumab. It is still off-label. Now, I was saying EUA, that is emergency use authorization. Though they are recommended everywhere, they always write EUA. That means we are just trying it. It has been just permitted by the Food and Drug Authority for emergency use. Once it is tried and tested, or maybe after 2 years, it will be included as a recommended guideline. Even today, if you have seen here, I've written off-label. That means EUA. Tocilizumab is IL-6 inhibitor. Okay. And if all the inflammatory markers are going up, patient is going down, breathlessness increased, is almost going for ventilation or ventilator. This is a wonderful drug. We all physicians have tried it in the ICUs. Only timing is important. If you give early, it is not useful. If you give late, that is after 24 hours of cytokine storm, it's not useful. So let them decide when to give. But this is a wonderful drug. And it's a off-label, of course. Methylene blue was tried, but of course not indicated, not included. Now our own 2-deoxyglucose by DRDO has developed in India. It is completed its phase 3 trial actually. It is in the market. Some people are using it, but it's not as breakthrough. It is not giving as good response as a tocilizumab would give. But some people do try it. Of course, there is no role of monoclonal antibody or interferons here. Next slide, please. Now, why there's a confusion when everything is available for the treatment? Why there was a confusion? So as I said earlier, no strict recommendation. Everything is EUA, off-label, and everything. I have not mentioned local. I will tell you, please show the slide. Next slide, please. See, this is the list of drugs which we were using. First, of course, is oxygen. Then doxy, azithromycin, antibacterial, they're out. Hydroxychloroquine, out. Ivermectin and deworming agent, out. Favipiravir. This was used, this should be used. This is antiviral drug. It reduces the viral activity. But this should be again used only when the patient is having fever at home. That time it should be used. Although all COVID centers, if you go and see the prescription, they give antiviral favipiravir. It doesn't cause any harm. Like steroids, suppose if you give in an early phase, it will cause harm. This will not cause harm. So even today, moderate cases or even mild cases, everybody is using favipiravir as an antiviral agent. But actually speaking, it should be used within 7 days of first day. Of course, you should know. Steroids are wonderful drug in moderate to severe. Remdesivir, as I said, it is used by IDCA has granted the permission. Anticoagulation must for moderate to severe. Convalescent plasma not used. IL-6 antagonist, of course, is good for cytokine storm. Methylene blue is not advised. Pegylated interferons are used only in mild cases, and monoclonal antibodies, a new entrant, of course, used. But it's very costly. One injection costs 60,000 rupees. So only affording mild, asymptomatic, and comorbid patients can be given these monoclonal antibodies. And less said about Ayurvedic homeopathic medicine because I am not the right person to comment on that. Local remedies, desi, kadhas, you know them all. So out of which modern medicine approves the ones which I have given tick marks. Next, please. So there was a confusion because of this. So many people were using different drugs. Well, few words about monoclonal antibody. They are laboratory made proteins that mimic the immune system's ability to fight the virus. Okay. The latest approval is sotrovimab. Now, these monoclonal antibodies, to pronounce them is very difficult. At least I find it very difficult. But this is the latest recommendation by US FDA somewhere in May or June 2021. Now, this also acts against the spike protein of COVID virus and blocks the virus attachment to the host cell. So this is a wonderful drug if given in asymptomatic mild cases. Moderate, some patient, of course we do give, but we weigh always pros and cons. It's not for us to decide. Let the specialist decide. But you should know this. The known and potential benefits of these monoclonal antibodies outweigh the risks. So risk, we have at least, I have seen at least 2000 monoclonal antibody being given till now. Seen and heard, of course, not only myself alone. Barring little allergic reactions and 1 or 2 severe COVID, I have not heard at least, or not seen in the literature also does not mention very many side effects. So it's a good drug in mild cases. Next slide, please. This is the name which is marketed in US, Regencov. Now this also is a casirivimab plus imdevimab, 1200 milligram each. Now I will not tell you single vial. It can have a single vial containing both the molecules or different vials for different molecules. Okay. The one who is giving, actually for Indian standards, we are giving only 600 milligram each. So whenever there is this is called antibody cocktail now. Okay. So when you, this is available in 1200 milligrams. So we share it among 2 patients in the ICUs. It is given in ICU setting. Patient is admitted in the ward, though he is a mild person, only for 24 hours, and screen him, see his renal functions, and then give this drug. As I said, 26th May, the other sotrovimab was given authorization. This is again emergency use authorization. Next, please. In our Indian market, it is marketed by Cipla. This is the IDSA guideline for monoclonal antibody. You have to have a proof of COVID. You cannot be suspected COVID patients, I am giving monoclonal. No, you have to have RT-PCR positive. Especially high risk patients who can progress to severe, like 60, 65 plus, who already have diabetes or bronchial asthma or ischemic heart disease, they can progress it. So they should be targeted so that they do not require hospitalization and they do not succumb. In mild to moderate also we give it. It's not necessary that we do give only to mild, but it's individual take. High risk patients only should be targeted. Severe disease is a contraindication. It's not use, it's a waste of money. So it should not be given. Next slide, please. This is about the monoclonal antibodies. In last 2 months, it is doing wonderful job in mild, affording patients. Why fear and confusion? See, we have studied mild, moderate, severe. We know when to admit, when not to admit, what is quarantine, how to isolate. But still there is a confusion in the minds of the patient as well as doctors, because number of people suddenly succumbing to corona infection for no reason, and doctors also succumbing. That's why confusion. Now, the next slide I will tell you why there is a fear and confusion more. I'm not saying only because of that. There is something called, we are exposed or bombarded. Exposed is a good word. Bombarded with huge amount of information. It's not knowledge. There is a difference between information and knowledge, which you know that. Every day or every minute, there is information, and we are getting it either on WhatsApp or Facebook or whatever. And of course, in news and electronic and print media. Every time news may not be reliable. So here are some tips for telling the difference and stopping the spread of misinformation. Now, in this diagram, if you can see my arrow, I don't know whether you can see them. This is a COVID affected patient who is going to transmit it to so many, let us say 3 patients. Okay. But this 3rd patient, he is going to give it to 3 more. But this patient did not send a rumor to the group chat. So 2 are saved. I'm talking about the misinformation. Then this person double checked. There's a fact check, you know, in the WhatsApp also and the Google, there's a fact check. He fact checked. He thought the information is wrong. So this information did not go out from these two. So the misinformation or the wrong interpretation or wrong perception given to the patient, this person got their news from trusted source. So he said that this may be true. This person asked, how do you know this is true? So this is how we should be behaving as a society, rather than somebody telling me that, okay, you try this CADA. I'm not demeaning CADA for anything, but try HCQ. Why don't you try HCQ? It's so cheap. So this kind of practices should be double checked, and they should be, especially all our modern medicine, we have modern medicine people, we should always have proof. That's why we have a guidelines and recommendation, isn't it? So these infodemic, this is known as infodemic, demography and information. Infodemic curve, we can settle it, next slide please, by having a double check with everyone. So what are do's and don'ts for all of us, not only for the doctors or for the patient? As I said, first wave was, we did not know. We have to reassure the patient, almost 85% to 90%, get all right, don't worry. This is not the end of the world. All the epidemics, endemics, everything comes to an end with the modern medicine and other pathies also. So this is not the end. The word about thermal scanners. If you go to the bank and the watchman over there, he will just put the scanner at the temple, and you almost think that, is he going to shoot me? That time, because of social distancing, that norm was not established. So the temperature was measured by the thermal scanners, but they are not very good also in my experience, and they do not detect COVID-19. It just detects fever. So it's of no use. Regular saline rinsing of the nose, is it helpful? In Marathi, it is known as Jalaneti, or Sanskrit, it's known as Jalaneti. Does it prevent COVID? No, it does not prevent COVID, but it can keep your nasal flora very good and non-infectious. That does not mean it will evict the COVID. The conception or the perception given to one of the patient, my patient, was Jalaneti should not give him COVID. Ultimately, he got COVID and he started asking me. So I said, it is a nasal flora which has been cleaned. That does not mean your virus has been cleaned. Okay. So you have to remove the misconceptions, although there is no harm in trying it, Jalaneti. Remember that time, they used to say the COVID virus will go away once the humid atmosphere takes hot and humid atmosphere, because India being a temperate country, a tropical country, close to tropic, we will not have. No, COVID-19 virus is everywhere, from Arctic, excepting Antarctic. Why I mentioned about my entourage to Antarctic and Arctic was this: excepting Antarctic, COVID is everywhere in all climates. So no weather is immune to COVID. Clinical trials have confirmed that hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, doxycycline, or azithromycin does not prevent infection or death due to COVID-19 infection. Now it's your take whether you want to give or not. Lot of talk in town about the zinc and vitamin C. In fact, last year vitamin C was in a shortage, but that's not the case. It does not prevent COVID infection, but yes, it boosts your immune system. So there's nothing wrong if you take it, but don't have an impression that I am taking zinc, I am taking vitamin C, I am taking vitamin D, and I will not have COVID. That's not the case. Most important, the best our ancestors have told us is wash your hands. Now, you cannot be washing your hands in a public places where everywhere it will not be available. So alcohol-based sanitizers erupted. So last year, Dettol did a wonderful service to the whole human race. Similarly, alcohol-based sanitizers have been included as essential medicine by WHO. So use them proficiently. For females, you can just keep in a small little bottle in a purse. If you touch something which is suspicious, you just wash it away with sanitizer. Coronavirus can affect all the populations. Although it was initially old, but the second wave, we have seen youngsters and middle-aged people succumbing also. So it affects all. And maybe the third wave, if at all it is coming, we don't know. This is the future. So children also. Children affected. I'm seeing patients, especially the 10-year plus children. I'm seeing them, but they're mild illnesses. And they just, you cannot isolate them, you cannot quarantine them, and it goes off. It is safer to frequently clean your hands and not all the while wear gloves. Why? Because wearing gloves risks transferring the germs from one surface to another and contaminating your hands when you are removing them. We as a health professionals or health workers, we use the gloves only for specific tasks like, let's say, Rayleigh tube insertion or taking away the catheter from the body, or sponging. A sister is doing sponging for the patient. She should be, of course, wearing the gloves. But gloves are not necessary for the general population. In between, we were seeing in the public places also people were wearing gloves. So it is not advised by WHO, not recommended, but although people are using it. Next slide, please. Can people wear masks? So what is ultimately you have to do is, it's a social distancing, wearing masks all the time when you're outdoor and when you are in contact with the person. In the sense, if you think that this particular person who is in my office, I think he's not looking well. So that actually today, WHO has said that mask all the time up when you are out of your house. Even in the house, suppose somebody is suffering from COVID, you have to mask yourself, all the rest of the family. Now, can people wear masks while exercising? That's a very difficult question. This is a slide taken from WHO. People should not wear masks when you're doing dynamic exercises like running, jogging, skipping, cycling, because that time you can feel breathless if your mask is quite tight. I have myself experienced when I'm walking fast, the mask really makes you breathless. Second thing, what mask does is when you're walking fast or you're having dynamic exercise, you're sweating also. So the mask gets damp, and there's a chance that some infection can sit in and you can get infected because of the damp mask on your face for 1 hour or 40 minutes, which you're doing exercise. So when you are inside the house, there's no need to wear mask when you are doing exercise. It may be yoga or meditation. When you are out in the open, in the ground, you may not wear mask when you are doing dynamic exercises. There was a belief that if I wear mask for a long period of time, like since morning to evening, especially those who are working in the office or the doctors who are working in ICUs for 8 hours duty, carbon dioxide toxicity or oxygen will be below hypoxia. Nothing of that's what happened, because our body really takes care of your carbon dioxide and oxygen by your center, which is situated in the medulla. But don't wear very, very tight mask. See, when you are having suffocation, that means your mask is very tight, maybe. And one must remember, when you are masking yourself, you should, when you are masking, your mask comes to your nose, you should pinch it so that it fits on your nose. Very often people are wearing masks, but the nose is not covered, which is the most important thing. So you as a medical fraternity should be educating the population also at the same time. Next slide, please. I think we are coming to an end of the session. So you are going to stay safe. What one can do is I can reduce the chance of being infected and reduce the chance of spreading the infection to others. So I should not be infected. If I get infected, my people at home, my family will be infected. So you have to use SMS, and that is soap and water first test. Wash your hands regularly and thoroughly with lots of soap and water. Mr. Amitabh Bachchan has been very conclusively told us for so many days. M is for mask. Mask up all the time when you are out. It's better, but you should not be suffocating due to the mask. You take care of that. Social distancing. This is a new norm, and we have to have. Now, in a country like ours, where a population is very big, is a big issue. but try to maintain at least 1 meter distance between you and the next person, especially when he's coughing or sneezing. Now you have to tell the patients that when they are coughing or sneezing, elbow should be taken help of, you know, that they should cough and sneeze in the elbow so that they cannot spray the liquid droplets to the surroundings. That's what is absolutely essential. At least put the handkerchief, fully cover it, your sneeze, but that's very difficult. People have got COVID because of the one sneeze or one strong cough, because you are going to put so many viruses in the aerosol. Of course, they travel only distance of 1 meter, but then at suppose with fast speed, if it is going, that's why you should you should have elbow method. Stay home if you feel unwell. Don't have that preoccupation that I will lose my salary, 1 day salary. No, it's okay to lose your salary rather than lose your life. Okay. Avoid travel as much as possible, because whatever travel mode you pick up, either is an aeroplane or it is by road, you know, whichever travel, you are going to have a contact with the human being. You're not going to have a space shuttle for you. So if possible, avoid travel. Travel was a luxury in last 20 years, which we all know. But at the moment, luxury should be aside, especially if you are older and comorbid illnesses. While some traditional and home remedies have said with a pride that we cure COVID, I do not have anything against them. But then, according to the modern medicine, today, at least, there is no evidence that current modern medicine can prevent or cure the disease, excepting SMS and proper precaution of yourself and your family members. So that is how we will stay safe. Of course, you will take precautions and you will vaccinate. Not only you will vaccinate yourself, you will advise vaccination to everyone around you. There is no contraindication for vaccination by and large in general. But in some patients who have got allergy to particular, you may be, see, the vaccination centers are doing a wonderful job. You must have visited the centers. They really take good care of you. They give you the number. One of my patients had facial edema and puffiness of face and edema of feet, and face became red. She got very scared. So she wanted to come to me. I said, don't have to come to me. You go to that the vaccination center. And they gave her, of course, cetirizine and Calpol. And that's how she got all right. So they are doing wonderful job. I'm so amazed with the kind of job our government is doing for COVID. I'm really, really amazed. It's very easy to say that the government should do this and that. But that kind of population, that kind of sometimes vaccine hesitancy we had initially, vaccinate yourself. Whichever vaccine you get, vaccinate. Don't wait for Sputnik or Moderna or these other names. Okay. Next slide, please. I think that's the last slide, if I'm not wrong. So this is the ultimate summary. This is a highly transmissible infection. Always ask history of close contact and travel. Categorize the illness clinically only. Then diagnose it with RT-PCR, especially if you cannot diagnose in a rural population. Maybe you can isolate the patient thinking that he possibly is a mild person. If it's moderate to severe, people are moving now. And dedicate to, ask the patient to go to dedicated COVID centers rather than a private practice. Reassurance is the most important thing, and always follow recommendations. Don't follow the news which comes in print or electronic media. Follow the recommendation by CDC, WHO, Government of India. There is a special site where Government of India, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. So you can visit the site. They will give you all the trackers are there. You must have visited, I'm quite sure. So there's special task force by ICMR and All India Institute of Medical Sciences. They came out with a joint national task force, and they came out with the categorization, classification of the illness and treatment modalities. Look for complications Now, variants are not touched upon because it's beyond the scope of these lectures. At present, we have a Delta variant, which is supposed to be very naughty one, which has traveled to US. And in fact, as I was just going through today's uh, statistics, US is showing more new cases than us. So the variants can be naughty, but then vaccination is useful in the variants also. That's a good news. Vaccinate yourself and advocate, be a legal advocate for vaccination. Tell everyone to get vaccinated and insist for COVID appropriate behavior. Because even if you are vaccinated, I can tell you in my own house, my husband, fully vaccinated, he's a doctor himself, he got COVID after vaccination also. So, but it was mild and I gave him monoclonal antibodies. That's a different matter. But after vaccination, quite few of my friends have got it, but it's a very, very mild COVID. Okay. So COVID appropriate behavior should be a new norm. Always, always and always. That's the message which you should drive to your patients. Future, is there going to be third wave? According to our epidemiologist, Mr. Dr. Ganga Khedkar, he says that second wave is getting over. This is the latest, somewhere in 28 July. So third, most probably you will have outbreaks and there'll be endemicity. Once it becomes endemic, we are going to develop resistance to that infection through the endemicity as well as the vaccination. Okay. So he says that third wave possibly is, of course, is a possibility, but I'm sorry, but if the variant becomes, the mutant becomes very strong, you never know, it can be as bad as second wave. So let us hope for the development of herd immunity, and let us hope that, as someone had said, go Karuna, go. So there is enough of everything every day for everyone. Don't panic, don't rush, and please, please don't overstop. Thank you so much. I would be very happy to answer your queries. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you for the lovely words and really nice lecture. Guys, I'll be launching a small poll. This will be the last one, don't worry. So
Okay.
please answer this one as honestly as you can. Just hold on.
If there are any questions, please unmute yourself and ask questions, or you can type them in the chat box so we can take them up. I hope you have all enjoyed the lecture. There's a lot of information that we have packed in this 1 hour of session. Normally, I think just now we just did a quick poll asking you whether you'd be interested in taking up an online course. Now, in the online course, what we've covered in this 1 hour, we would probably cover that in 2 to 3 lectures. We have multiple online courses. We have a very vast infectious disease course having about 72 lectures, quite in-depth knowledge and absolutely current knowledge on different infectious diseases. And we also have a short course on COVID-19, which goes beyond just the diagnosis and treatment. I guess you all know that, and we are expecting this to happen, that all the families and the patients who suffered through this COVID-19 pandemic is going to have a long-term impact, especially psychological impact and so on. So all that has been covered in the COVID-19 course. So all of you who are interested in going through these courses, do let us know. We have excellent feedbacks on both these courses. So visit our website and look up what all is covered and the kind of feedbacks that we have received. On behalf of all of you and Quest Healthcare, I thank Dr. Gayatri for giving us such insights into the COVID-19 pandemic. I now leave it to Aman to take up if there are any questions. And we do look forward to getting your feedback also on this webinar. If you would like to, like us to do more such webinars, we will be happy to do that. So do please get back to us on how you like this webinar. And if there are any questions, please raise your hand, please unmute yourself and ask the questions. I'm sure Dr. Gayatri would be very happy to ask more questions,
My pleasure.
answer your questions. Thank you.
Guys, please ask any questions in the chat. Don't hesitate. We all stand to learn, right? I'm sure all of you have a lot of knowledge. You can also share anything that you feel is relevant, any feedback or anything. So please just yeah. Yes. Hello. Yes.
If anybody would like to ask any questions, please go ahead and ask, unmute yourself and ask questions. Otherwise, we wouldn't know.
Hello,
Yes. 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 Go ahead.
I am Dr. Somasundaram, retired medical practitioner. I did my MBBS from Madras and DCH from Bombay. I'm 89 years old and doing consulting practice. Years ago, I read an article written by one Dr. McIntosh from Veterans Administration Hospital, United States, saying that fever is, when a person gets fever, it is the body's initial response to infection, and the fever should not be brought down by drugs, unless in situations like children having convulsions and hyperparaxia, etc. But here it is, everywhere I see that the moment a person gets fever, even if it is 100, 101, we are advising paracetamol 650 milligrams 3 times. So can you tell me anything about this? Actually, some people believe that fever itself is some kind of protection against viral replication.
May I answer, sir? Am I audible, sir?
Yes.
Sir, thank you so much for you are right question, and you are a thorough academician. I would say that. Yes, we have been taught in medical schools, medical colleges, that fever is protecting against infection, because high temperature is not good for a particular virus or particular bacteria. That's correct. But you know, sir, over the years, social dynamics has changed. It is not the fever which has changed, the social dynamics, because nobody wants to wait. It's a fast life. I'm sorry to say that, but it goes against medicine, but it is that's what it is. The moment patient gets fever, suppose if I tell them not to worry, he goes to another doctor. It's not that I am losing the patient, that's why I'm giving. No, sir. It is because people are not ready to wait. And again, I may say that 20 years ago, that was not the case, sir. When the social media, the news and print media, and so many news channels constantly bombarding the news, they were not there, sir, when only the Sahyadri or the DD was there, Doordarshan. That time, this was not the case, sir. People were, responding to your request for not looking after you. In fact, sir, patients come in a shock with so much of paracetamol. But then it is because there is not ready to wait. That's the first thing. Secondly, the fever which it produces excessive sweating and tachycardia, and people should rehydrate. But that does not happen. Previously, according to me, sir, the old woman at home, the grandmother or grandfather used to advise that don't worry, give him a lot of water, give him a lot of sharbat, and he should be all right. Next morning, you can go to doctor. Here, we are not going to wait. As soon as I get fever, I'm going to go to the doctor, and doctor has to just prescribe paracetamol. You're absolutely right, sir. I agree with you. Not more and not less, but more. But social dynamic has changed. That's the reason maybe people, I never prescribe paracetamol. In fact, I said in this slide also, paracetamol according to the need. If fever is really very high, maybe one can add mefenamic acid. That's what I said, sir. Do you agree with me, sir? Because you have seen generations.
I am practicing in an industrial area where I get lot of respiratory cases,
Yes, sir.
including bronchial asthma and things like that. See, I have noticed that if a person comes fever with respiratory problem, your medicines, antibiotics and other medicines acts better when the fever is there in the body.
Yes, sir. But that's what I'm saying. The social dynamics has changed so much that there is a very nuclear family. Both are working. They don't have enough time to spare for their children also, and forget about the loved ones or the parents very often. I'm not saying this general rule, and that's why this thing has come up that fever has to be immediately treated. You are absolutely right, sir. Fever should not be treated immediately, but of course, 24 hours if the fever remains, we have to treat it. That's my answer, sir.
Good, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I guess anyone else? You can type your question in chat. Please address it to everyone so all can see the questions. You can also unmute yourselves and ask any questions you have.
Hello.
Yes,
Yes.
ma'am, go ahead.
This is Dr. Manu Jain. I'm from Surat. I registered for webinar, but I could not get the link and I could not open it. So can you send me the recording?
This for the text.
Yeah.
Yes, doctor, we will send you the recording. We'll
Okay.
definitely send you the recording.
Hello.
Yes,
Yes.
Dr. Manu.
Yeah.
I'm from Quext, and we heard your question and we will share the recording with you.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, ma'am.
Anybody else has any questions? So anyway, if it's been a wonderful 1.5 hours of interaction, and we're very glad and thank you all for sparing the time and being here throughout. Yes, anybody has any questions?
Yes, ma'am. I'm Dr. Mohan.
Yes, please.
I'm working in a government setup in Mehboob Nagar. And we had critical COVID patients on NIV, and we were trying pyroxicum, and but it was resulting in, but we don't know whether we gave only single dose, but it was resulting in renal failure at the critical stage. Can it be attributed, the renal failure could be attributed to the side effect of pyroxicum, ma'am?
Yes. See, in a critical patient, if was the patient's blood pressure normal or he was in hypotension?
Here the blood pressure was normal, ma'am.
Normal blood pressure.
Normal.
COVID itself can cause renal shutdown. COVID
Yes, ma'am.
infection, because it, as I said, macrothrombi formation, it can, cause renal parenchymal damage, producing renal failure, which could be almost permanent. And nobody does dialysis on COVID patients. It's very difficult. It's a difficult situation. Pyroxicam can be causing it, but one dose, I don't think we should be causing it. Very many drugs are tried even now. Like, colchicine also has been tried in severe cases, thinking
Yes.
that it can give you a good response, but it is still an experimental basis and one to one.
Yes.
Suppose I'm using colchicine, I'm finding good, I'm using it, but it's not a recommendation or it's not world over. But people are using piroxicam. There is a literature saying that
Okay.
piroxicam can be used, but this is 1-to-1. And piroxicam, one single dose does not cause renal shutdown. That much I can tell you. It could be the
Okay.
COVID itself. And patient may be diabetic. If it is severe, that means it could be comorbid conditions. Did he have any
Okay.
comorbid conditions?
No, ma'am. She was not having any comorbids. She developed a steroid-induced diabetes alone, and she
Okay.
was maintaining on NIV for 10 days. The saturation and BP, every vitals were stable for 10 days. The
Okay.
day after piroxicam, her urine output started to get
No.
low.
What is the age, if I may ask?
Age, yes, ma'am. Her age was around 58 to 60.
58. So that was young lady. No, so 10 days, why you had to fight? You did not put her on mechanical ventilation on for 8 days NIV and then, or she came out, or you just could wean her?
Good to so many patients were there. So
No.
yes,
Renal shutdown, no, she succumbed to renal shutdown.
yes, ma'am. She succumbed.
I'm sorry. 1 dose of piroxicam, but in the critical condition, we never know what we are using because there's, I'm telling you, because I was telling the confusion story, because as suppose she had survived, it would be the you all's institute could be saying, the institute says you and other your colleagues, oh, piroxicam is very wonderful drug, but try another one, it may not work. So these
Yes.
are the experimental use drugs from one doctor to another doctor basis. There's no harm because
Yes.
you are trying to save the patient. If you
Yes,
use
yes.
some drug, there's nothing harm. I mean, your conscience is clear and your intention is very good. I don't
Yes.
think it should be a problem. But piroxicam 1 dose should not cause renal shutdown. That much I know.
Okay, ma'am. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, guys, anyone else? You can, as I said before, you can type it in the chat, no worries. Okay, so if no one else has any more questions, I guess we'll be ending the session now. Don't worry, we'll be sharing the PPT and the recording with everyone who has attended. And of course, one last really big thank you to all you doctors, to Gayatri Harshe ma'am. Thank you so much for sharing such valuable information with all of us. So I think we can end the meeting now. So thank you all for joining, and hope to see you soon with Quex. And yeah, have a nice day and be safe.
Yes, stay safe.
Stay
And
safe.
SMS.
Yeah,
Yes.
SMS. Remember SMS.
Yes.
Right. Okay, thank you so much, everybody, and we can close.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.